Welcome back to Real Repairs for Real Customers. Now obviously I'm not Rick. My name's Gary and I have the honor and privilege to work with my friend, very good friend and mentor, Rick Lockwood on these videos. He's invited me today to share a repair with you. Now obviously, we're not on the car lot. We're in beautiful Northwest Michigan where we're taking a little bit of time off. But in order to get here, somebody had to drive a car, and that was me. And if you're like me, driving a car means sometimes you got to hang on to the steering wheel, right? Well, if your steering wheel's cracked, ugly, got nicks and scratches, or it's just as darn ugly, we're going to show you today a simple way to repair that leather wrap steering wheel in your car. So hop on board and come along. We're going to show you an easy repair on a leather wrap. Now let's get to work. Here we have a very typical leather wrap steering wheel. This is on a Chevy Silverado. You see how it gets very rough? This thing had a lot of heavy gouges and nicks in it. And I'm just going to cover up the dash here, try to keep all the dust out of there. And you'll see me do that a lot on a steering wheel during this repair, because to me a steering wheel needs to feel right, not only look right. A steering wheel is one of the first things you see when you look in a car, and a steering wheel like this on a $20,000 truck isn't going to sell. So what I got here is some 120 grit sandpaper, 100 and 120, you can use whatever you want. I'm going to get really hard on this because I want to get rid of the deepest gouges in this steering wheel with the sandpaper. I'm trying to get the contour right. One of the things about using a sandpaper like that, as you'll see here in a second, I'm basically making a suede steering wheel. I'm ripping the leather finish right off there. I'm trying to smooth it down with some real heavy sandpaper. You'll see those gouges there I'm going to work on, because again, a steering wheel needs to feel right. You see I've made some nice suede there. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. And one product I like to use on these when we make a steering wheel look like that is a product called leather primer. Or I'm sorry, not leather primer, plastic primer, hard plastic primer. It's a product you wouldn't normally use on leather, but because the steering wheel doesn't flex, we can go ahead and do that. This is a very hard, brittle product made for plastic, and it's extremely tough. And all I'm trying to do here is just to smooth that suede down. And we'll wipe a couple coats of this on here. This is a very fast drying product. You'll see when I use a heat gun here that this dries extremely fast. I use a heat gun versus a hair dryer or a blow dryer. Just got to be more careful with the heat with that. Keep it moving. Try not to blister your products with this. You can come back over. I'm sanding this down now with some 400 grit sandpaper. And I'm going to do this several times on the steering wheel because this one was really bad. You can do these steps as many times as you feel necessary. We're going to be doing this a few times. I'm going to come over now with some 400, trying to get that feel right. I'm getting the suede all laid down. You can see the suede look is gone, but there's still, I can still feel a lot of rippling in this steering wheel. So we're going to go ahead and give it another coat. Again, this is a hard plastic primer. It doesn't fill real well, but it does do a nice job of sealing all that raw leather right back up. I don't like putting a lot of product, different fillers on a steering wheel because it's such a high wear area. You know, you're holding on to it hopefully the whole time you're driving the car. So I don't like to use real heavy fillers. I will on this steering wheel come over it here in a little bit with a little slurry mixture of some leather fill because this one had some real deep gouges. You can see those deep gouges I'm going to be working on here. I'm going back over it with 400 grit sandpaper. Put another coat of primer on it. And again, you can do this as many times as you want because this isn't This isn't a product that's real heavy and it's going to roll off, after you grab onto that steering wheel and grab it a few times. Always make sure you get the back of that steering wheel too. First few steering wheels I did, I'd get out and I'd look back at it and admire my work when I was getting out of the truck, and the back of the steering wheel was a mess. So just get the back of that steering wheel at the same time, because that's very visible through the windshield. You see, I got some heavy gouges, still got some deep gouges there we're going to work on. Right there is a pretty good gouge. That was the heaviest gouge on that steering wheel. You come back over with a little bit more plastic primer. If you notice, I didn't tape that steering wheel off because I'm not going to spray this steering wheel. If I can get away with not spraying a steering wheel, I'm going to save myself a lot of tape off and a lot of overspray problems, having to worry about where that overspray is going. I've tried to cover the dashes real well, but no matter how careful you are, if you got a door open and a little wind blowing through there, you're going to end up with a little overspray somewhere. You can get away with this technique on a black steering wheel a lot easier than you can a light steering wheel. It doesn't work as good on a light steering wheel. Here I've determined that I'm not going to be able to fill those gouges in as good as I want with plastic primer and sand in it. So I've taken some leather cream fill and I made a slurry mixture with the dye. I put it in a towel like that and I just rub it all together and make a black slurry mixture. And this is a little bit more filler, a heavier filler, but it's a real light leather filler. It's very durable. It sticks down to leather extremely well. I've never had a steering wheel fail using this technique. When you dry an air cured product like that, be very careful with a heat gun not to blister it. If you blister that stuff, you got a whole new problem to deal with. So just don't do it. You see, I've gone across the back of that steering wheel just to make sure the back of that wheel looks good. And again, you can do these steps, this step as many times as you'd like. I'm not putting that much filler on it. There was probably more dye in there than anything. I'm drying it up real well, and I'm going to come back over and sand it with 400 grit again. .400 grit's a fairly aggressive sandpaper, and you can see that leather cream fill with that dye, it's not rolling off there. It's really stuck down well, and you want your steering wheel to be very durable. A steering wheel has to feel right to me. It's a pet peeve of mine. We were going to Pennsylvania to visit some friends of ours one time, and my wife's caravan had Town and Country had a nick on the back of the steering wheel. And somewhere in the middle of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I asked her for her emery board for her fingernails. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to file it off going down the road. So that's just me. It's got to feel good. So you'll see me do this a lot. I'm checking how it feels. We're gonna give it another coat of the slurry mixture here. You can see the steering wheel starting to look a lot better. We've gotten rid of all the fuzz. What I'm going for here now is more. I'm working on the feel of the steering wheel, trying to get it as smooth as I can. Again, make sure you get the back of that steering wheel at the same time. Sanding it back. Again, you can do this as many times. I don't like doing quite this many times, but this steering wheel was so bad that it's taken a couple coats of that filler. But again, you can see it's very durable. I'm sanding pretty aggressively on this with 400 grit, and it's not going to come off. I've actually done the steering wheel in my own work van just to check durability, and this this process works pretty well. I've never had it flake or peel off. This technique works real well if you have a mechanic that's gouged the customer's steering wheel. Here we're coming over now with our first real guide coat of just a pure black dye. This is a good water-based product dye. I don't think you could get away with this with a solvent. I know you can't do this with a solvent-based. And again, on a black steering wheel, very rarely will I shoot a steering wheel with a paint gun, unless it needs texture. If it needs texture, I will use my gun for texturing. But on a leather wrap like this, I want that smooth, and you can do a black steering wheel just like this. It doesn't work as well on a lighter color because it doesn't cover quite as well. I will spray those, but black steering wheels are one of my favorite things to do because they're so easy. I'm not worried about getting dye on that silver spoke. I can wipe that off when I'm done. So you see, I didn't even tape anything off here. Come back to a little, so you can sand right over the, if you're just using dye coats. I have even if on real smooth and high-end cars, I'll come back over before I give it a final coat of dye. I'll sand that back with some 1000 or 1200 grit to make that absolutely glass smooth. Feels good to me. We got a heavy coat. Now I'm gonna come back over this with a little bit heavier coats of dye now. Now you can really see what we got here. The thing is you want that steering wheel to be the same gloss all the way around, the same feel all the way around. We prep the steering wheel, the whole steering wheel, because I'm going to do the whole thing with a final coat of dye. Dry this. I'm going to probably put a couple more coats of dye on here. But again, I'm just wiping on a water-based dye. If you're wondering what the mess on the end of my heat gun is, that's a tennis ball. So when I lay it down on a carpet, it doesn't burn the carpet. Probably just about ready for a final coat. And I like a real heavy coat. I'll give it one more little sand coat here, sand job. Make sure you get the inside of that steering wheel at the top too. Spin that steering wheel upside down and make sure you do that area too because it's very visible. It's hard to get to at that position. I always grab the keys on a steering wheel so I can spin it around. It turns a lot easier when the car's running. But you probably already knew that. I think we've got this thing just about as smooth as we're going to get it. So now we're going to go for a finish. Again, my final coats of dye will be pretty heavy. Try not to streak it, but I just use a towel, pretty heavy coat of dye in the towel, and just start wiping it on. And um, if you can't get it glossy enough, you can put a little bit of plastic primer in there. I like to put a little bit of slip and crosslink, put a little slip additive in there just so that steering wheel is nice and smooth and slippery. Just gives that leather wrap a really nice feel when you do that. It's looking pretty good, but I think we're just gonna get one more. I'm just gonna smooth that whole finish out now. That's pretty heavy coated dye right there. You see I'm getting it on that silver spoke. There you want to get that inside of the top around those threads there. Spin that steering wheel right upside down and get that whole thing. And again, make sure you get on the back of that steering wheel so you don't leave any big streaks back there. It looks pretty good. It's got a nice gloss. It feels good. I'm just taking a little bit of cleaner on my towel and wiping off those spokes now. Again, if I were to spray that, I'd probably taped all that off, but it's a lot more time and effort to do that. It's just so much easier to wipe on black dye. Works well with black and gray. Does not work real well with tan. All right, that looks good. Final product looks good. It's smooth, it's shiny, no fuzzies, and it feels good. Now, after we were done working that day, I had the pleasure of chauffeuring Rick and Sandy and my wife along some beautiful parts of Lake Michigan. We're up at a lookout point in Arcadia, Michigan. It's between Arcadia and Frankfort, right on Lake Michigan. There happened to have been two ore freighters. They were probably about 5 miles out in the lake. There was a gentleman there with a program that was identifying those boats. He said those are the two largest ore freighters on Lake Michigan. These things are huge. We're on a pretty tall bluff here. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 80 feet down. Oh, we had a hunting buddy out there. Rick was really good with the camera to catch that eagle. So when there was two of them there that day, they're out hunting today. Looks like he found something to eat right there. There goes a rabbit. We moved a little further up the coast of Michigan. We're up in the Sleeping Bear National Lake Shore. There's a national park here. It's in this is Big Glen and Little Glen Lakes. Lake Michigan is right behind us. This is a beautiful area. We were a little bit early on the colors. The colors this year in Michigan are real late because it's been so warm. But this is a beautiful spot. There's a couple islands out here. They're called the Manitou Islands, Big Manitou and Little Manitou. And this is a picture of Big Manitou. This we're actually looking out in Lake Michigan right here. The Indian lore is that a mother bear came swimming across from Wisconsin, probably ran out of cheese over there or something. They came to Michigan, but just before they got to shore, the babies drowned. And this is the babies out in the lake, and that's the mother. That's the other island. And the mother made it to shore, and she's up here in this big sand dune mourning the loss of her children, her their cubs. It's just a pretty spot if you're ever in Michigan. It's called the Pierce Stocking National Lake Shore, or the Sleeping Bear National Lake Shore. We had a beautiful day. It got a little bit of breezy out here today, but it was warm. Just a pretty spot. But you're looking out over Lake Michigan here. We had the pleasure of touring around northern Michigan with Rick and Sandy. We probably visited a winery or two, maybe. Just a lot of fun. We love taking people to this part of Michigan because this is one of the prettiest areas. It's up by Traverse City. If you look at a map of Michigan, it's up in the little peninsula area up there. About, if you look at your left hand, it's about the tip of your little finger. That's panned out, looking at the two islands there. It's all sand dunes. I was down to the lake today. I went down this morning because it was about 50-mile-an-hour winds, and we had about 12-foot waves on that lake today. I told Rick to go down here, run down to the bottom of this hill and run back. He didn't do it because there was a sign right to the top said they would charge you for a rescue if they had to drag your butt back up that hill. So he decided not to go down there. It's a long ways down. No, I've never done it myself either. I'm old and smarter than that. That's a pretty steep dune, goes all the way down to the lake. The water levels in Lake Michigan are extremely high. We're now up in a place called Northport up on the Leonard Peninsula, and this was a old home out on an island out there. It's called Gull Island. It was owned by an entrepreneur in the 1930s, and vandals and the seagulls destroyed the house. And it's now a protected area. That's a seagull nesting area. It's called Gull Island. Here we're at one of our favorite vineyards up in Traverse City. We're looking out over the West Bay. We're looking at the peninsula that land you see there is another peninsula that goes up in the middle of the two bays. This is just a beautiful area. They do a lot of weddings here, and you can see why. This was early in the morning. It was quite hazy that morning, but it was a beautiful day later. We had a Chamber of Commerce day here. This was early in the morning. No, we didn't sample any wine. They weren't open yet. But I wanted to take them up there because the views are just outstanding here. It's a place called Willow Vineyards. Here's the vineyards. This area in Michigan produces a lot of wine. We're probably, I think Michigan is number 4 or 5 in the country in wine production. We don't do well with red wines here because it's not a long enough growing season. There are some reds that will do okay here, but it's mostly white wines. White wines, Chardonnays, Rieslings, Pinot Gris. They're starting to make some Sauvignon Blanc. Here's some beautiful vines here. Those look like white. Those are grapes for white wine there. They'll have a weddings right out in the middle of this vineyard. I've seen pictures of it, and they have a beautiful area there for receptions. So if anybody wants to come to Michigan and get married, I'll tell you where this is at. These vines are at a place, another vineyard called Black Star, and they actually cover these because the birds will start eating all these grapes. It's kind of neat. You come in there and they're all covered with these nets. That's a pretty good size area of grapes there. They can make a lot of wine from that. It's a beautiful vineyard called Black Star Farms. There's a beautiful home, colonial home here. But it's a pretty area up here. We do grow a little bit of red grapes, not much because it's not warm enough to do red grapes, to do good red wine up in that part of the country. We're on the 45th parallel right there, which is the same parallel that runs through Alsace, France, where they make world-class Rieslings and Chardonnays, and that's what they do here. We ate at 45th Parallel Cafe. That's probably about a half a mile from the parallel. One of our favorite breakfast spots up in Suttons Bay, Michigan. A good breakfast there. And from there, I think we took a little ride down that peninsula and then through Traverse City. Oh, we had to stop and get some cheese for my wife. She will not leave there without getting some raclette cheese at the Leonard Cheese Factory. It's a hard cheese, as you'll see here in a second. This is where they make it. They have a big storage, underground storage out behind there with thousands of these wheels of cheese in there. It's a very hard cheese, as you can see. And they melt it and put it on different things. Now, Rick was amazed at the trucks we have in Michigan, all the wheels. That's because we allow about 250,000 pounds on our roads, so they got to have a lot of tires. This is a relatively new vineyard up on the Mission Peninsula, and if anybody ever watches the Curse of Oak Island on History Channel, you'll see Rick Lagina always has a shirt on that says MV, and that's for Mari Vineyards. This is his vineyard in Traverse City. It's a beautiful Michigan sandstone. This is one of the prettiest vineyards up there. And you can see the views from there are outstanding. It's just a pretty spot. So if you ever watch The Curse of Oak Island on History Channel, the Rick Lagina is the money behind that. And he always has the same shirt on. It's a little burgundy shirt. It's got MV on the breast. That's his vineyard. He's actually growing grapes under a greenhouse out here, 10 acres, because he thinks he can make red wine. And Rick and Sandy stopped at a little winery right down the road that we've kind of forgotten about. This is probably about 5 miles from my house. We're going to have to go visit them because their wine was pretty good. And there is no trip to West Michigan complete without going and watching a sunset over the big pond. So sit back, enjoy a little bit of pure Michigan.